He had taken others before her, and no one had ever escaped. But this time, something went wrong. Because the girl he chose wasn't just another victim. It started on a quiet afternoon. The kind of day that feels ordinary. The kind no one ever thinks twice about. The sun was still out. People were nearby. Nothing felt out of place. She was just 15 years old. Standing outside a friend's house. Waiting. Not afraid. Not distracted. Just living a normal moment. And then, a car pulled up. At first, nothing about it seemed wrong. No loud music. No sudden movement. Just a man, sitting behind the wheel. He looked normal. The kind of face you wouldn't remember. The kind of person you wouldn't notice twice. And that's exactly why he was dangerous. Because within seconds, before she could react, before anyone could see, everything changed. A door opened. A voice, low, controlled. And then, a weapon. Not waved. Not used to create chaos. Just enough, to make sure she understood. There were no screams. No struggle anyone could hear. Just a moment. That ended everything she thought she knew about safety. And then, she was gone. 1 second, she was standing there. The next, there was nothing left. No witnesses who understood what they saw. No alarm raised in time. No chance to stop it. But what no one realized, what no one could have known in that moment, was that this wasn't random. The man who took her had done this before. He didn't act on impulse. He didn't take risks. He watched. He waited. He chose his moment carefully, every time. And until that day, every girl he chose never made it back. No witnesses. No survivors. No one to tell the story. Which meant, no one knew how he worked. No one knew where he took them. No one knew how it ended. But this time, something was different. Because while he believed this would follow the same pattern, while he believed he had complete control, he overlooked one thing. Her. Because from the very beginning, she was paying attention. Not panicking. Not shutting down. Not giving him what he expected. She listened. She watched. She remembered. Every sound. Every turn. Every detail, he thought didn't matter. And somewhere along the way, without him realizing it, the situation started to change. Because this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about waiting. Waiting for the moment. He would make a mistake. And when that moment came, she would only get one chance. One decision. One move. Between becoming another victim, or becoming the only one who ever escaped. What happened next took place over just a few hours. But it would reveal how a single decision can change everything. Minutes turned into hours. And hours slowly turned into something heavier, something no one in that town was prepared to explain. To everyone else, it looked like a normal disappearance. No screams. No witnesses. No clues. The kind of case that gets a few headlines, then quietly fades into another file on a crowded police desk. Her name was entered into the system like all the others. A missing person report. A routine search response. Standard questions. Standard procedures. But nothing about this case would stay standard for long. Because what investigators didn't know yet was that she was still alive. Not far from where she was taken, the world continued as if nothing had shifted. A vendor still called out prices on the roadside. Traffic still moved in its usual disorder. Phones still rang. People still argued about ordinary things: money, weather, time. Life did not stop for her disappearance. And that was the first thing that made the case different. Inside the first police briefing room, the file was simple. A location. A time. A brief witness account that didn't fully connect. A blurred description of a vehicle that could belong to almost anyone. Nothing solid. Nothing usable. And yet, something about it didn't sit right with the lead investigator. Not because of what was there, but because of what wasn't. No forced entry. No struggle reported in real time. No noise that matched the severity of what was suspected. It didn't behave like a random abduction. It behaved like something rehearsed. Controlled. Deliberate. Back at the scene, officers walked the same stretch of road again and again, trying to rebuild a moment that no one had fully seen. But the street refused to give answers. It looked normal in every direction. Too normal. Almost carefully normal. And that was when the contradiction began to form. Because in most cases like this, something is always left behind. A sound. A trace. A mistake. But here, it was as if the moment had been removed from time itself. Hours passed. Then reports started coming in from nearby streets. Small inconsistencies. A car seen briefly but never clearly remembered. A figure described differently by every witness. A moment of hesitation in people's accounts, like their memory couldn't hold on to what they saw. Nothing confirmed. But enough to disturb the pattern. And still, no one understood the most important truth yet. She wasn't just missing. She was somewhere. Still aware. Still moving. Still counting time in a way no one searching for her could understand. Because inside that silence, something unexpected was happening. She was not reacting like a victim. She was observing. Every stop. Every turn. Every pause the vehicle made. Not in panic, but in detail. As if her mind had shifted into something sharper than fear. Meanwhile, the person controlling the situation believed everything was going exactly as before. No resistance. No complication. No deviation. A pattern repeating itself perfectly. At least, that's what he assumed. But what he didn't account for was that patterns only work when everything behaves the same way twice. And she wasn't behaving the same way. Back at headquarters, the case began to change shape. Not officially yet. Not in reports. But in the minds of those reviewing it. Something about it felt off. Not enough to prove. But enough to question. And in true crime cases, that's where everything begins to shift. Not with answers. But with doubt. Because now the real questions had started forming. Who took her? Why was there no clear signature? How could someone disappear so completely in an open place? And most disturbing of all, why did it feel like the case was still active? Somewhere beyond the town's awareness, time was still moving forward. But not in the way anyone expected. And slowly, the investigation was about to realize something far more unsettling than the disappearance itself. This wasn't the end of a moment. It was the beginning of a pattern being exposed. And the first real clue. was still with her. She wasn't trained for survival, but she noticed things most people ignore. Her life, before everything changed, was simple on the surface. She followed routines without questioning them. Same routes. Same timing. Same small habits that most people would call ordinary. But there was something subtle about her. She paid attention. Not in an obvious way. Not like she was searching for danger. More like she naturally remembered what others forgot. A car that parked too long. A face she had seen twice in different places. A detail that didn't belong. It wasn't fear that made her observant. It was awareness. And that small trait would later become the only thing separating confusion from clarity. Neighbors described her as quiet, independent, someone who kept to herself but always seemed aware of her surroundings. On the other side of the same town, he existed in a way that made him almost invisible. Neighbors described him as forgettable, which is exactly what made him dangerous. He didn't stand out. He didn't draw attention. He blended into everyday life so well that even regular interactions felt forgettable afterward. People remembered his presence only vaguely, never clearly enough to describe him with certainty. He worked alone. Always alone. No visitors. No familiar faces coming and going. No visible connections tying him to anyone. His routines were consistent, almost careful. Predictable movements. Quiet habits. Nothing that suggested urgency or chaos. And that was what made him unnoticed. To the outside world, there was nothing unusual. But beneath that normal surface were patterns that didn't belong in ordinary life. Long stretches of isolation. Repeated movements without explanation. A life structured in a way that avoided visibility rather than embraced it. He didn't need recognition. He needed to remain unseen. And in a town that overlooked details, that was enough. Two people. Same environment. Completely different awareness of the world around them. One noticed too much. The other depended on being noticed too little. And neither of them yet understood how close those two realities were about to collide. It happened in seconds. The light had already begun to fade when the street grew quieter than usual. Shadows stretched longer between the houses, and the normal sounds of the town slowly thinned out into silence. She was still following what felt like a familiar path, nothing unusual, nothing that suggested the night would break differently than any other. Then the moment arrived. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just sudden. A brief interruption in something that had felt stable only a second before. A movement. A shift. Something her mind registered too late to fully process. There was confusion first, because it didn't immediately make sense. The kind of confusion that tries to explain what the eyes have already seen but the mind refuses to accept. A fraction of resistance. A second of disbelief. And then, everything collapsed into silence again. And just like that, she was gone. No sound followed that moment. No immediate reaction from the surroundings. The street stayed still, almost unaware of what had just changed inside it. No witnesses stepped forward. No clear sign remained behind. Nothing that could immediately explain what had broken the normal flow of the night. Only absence. A space where something had been seconds before, now empty, unfinished, and unanswered. And in that silence, the first real problem began to form. Not what was seen, but what was completely missing. She woke up slowly. Not to light. Not to noise. Just to a quiet unfamiliar stillness that didn't match anything she remembered. The air felt different. Controlled. Contained. Like the world outside had been removed and replaced with something smaller, tighter. For a moment, she didn't move. She listened first. That instinct came before thought. Footsteps somewhere nearby. A door that didn't fully close. A rhythm in the distance that repeated too evenly. He didn't act like a monster, which made it even worse. When he appeared, there was no chaos in him. No anger. No urgency. He spoke normally, like nothing about the situation was unusual at all. Calm voice. Controlled tone. Measured words. He explained things the way someone would explain rules in a normal place. What she could do. What she couldn't. What was expected. No shouting. No violence in his presence. Just structure. And that structure was more unsettling than anything loud would have been. Because everything around her felt deliberate. The space. The timing. Even the silence between his words. He wasn't unpredictable. He was precise. And that precision made it harder to find fear in the usual places, because fear expects chaos. That's when she realized. Panic wouldn't save her. Paying attention would. So she stopped reacting and started observing. Not the situation itself, but the details inside it. The way footsteps returned at fixed intervals. The pattern of when silence appeared and when it didn't. The consistency in how long certain sounds lasted before stopping. Even his movements, they weren't random. They followed structure. Repetition. Routine. And routines always had edges. She began to study those edges quietly. Moments when sound changed slightly. Pauses that were too predictable. Small imperfections in something that was supposed to feel controlled. Not resisting. Not rushing. Just collecting. Because in a place designed to remove control, the only thing left was awareness. She didn't rush. Not when the first opportunity felt close. Not when the silence stretched long enough to make movement seem possible. She didn't try to escape, not yet. She was waiting. Inside, her world became smaller, but clearer. She began mapping it in her mind. Not just what she could see, but what repeated. The position of objects. The distance between spaces. The sound of movement before a door opened. She tested things carefully. A delayed response. A slight change in where she looked. Small shifts in behavior, nothing obvious. Just enough to watch how he reacted. And he did react. Not always the same way. But enough for her to notice something important. His control wasn't perfect. Over time, something subtle began to change. He spoke a little more. Stayed a little longer. Became just familiar enough to lower his guard, without realizing it. Not trust. But the illusion of it. And she used that. Carefully. Quietly. Outside, the world was moving in a different direction. A report had been filed. A search had begun. Questions asked. Routes checked. Statements taken. But nothing held. No clear description. No reliable timeline. No evidence that pointed anywhere specific. Days passed, and hope started fading. The case didn't stop. It slowed. Back inside, time felt different. Longer. Heavier. And something else began to shift. The patterns she had been learning started to change. His routine broke slightly. His timing became less consistent. His presence less predictable. Not chaotic. but no longer precise. And that was when the tension truly began. Because unpredictability meant risk. For both of them. She had been waiting for a mistake. But now she understood something more dangerous. The moment she acted might come when nothing felt safe at all. At first, it was just a feeling. Something about the space didn't belong to a single moment. It felt used, repeated, familiar in a way that shouldn't exist. Then she saw it. Not obvious. Not placed to be noticed. A small detail, out of place, but not random. Something that suggested presence, before hers. She wasn't the first. The realization didn't come all at once. It built quietly. A mark that didn't match the room. An object that didn't belong to her. A pattern that felt older than her time there. None of it confirmed anything on its own. But together, it formed something heavier. This had happened before. And if it had happened before, then there was an ending she hadn't seen. That was when everything changed. Because surviving wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about time. Then, for the first time, something broke. Not loudly. Not completely. Just enough. For the first time, he slipped. A door that didn't close the way it always did. A routine that shifted by seconds too many. A moment where his attention wasn't where it should have been. Small. But real. And she noticed. Of course she did. Because she had been waiting for exactly that. The pattern wasn't perfect anymore. And once a pattern breaks, it doesn't go back the same way. And that's when she made a decision. Not rushed. Not desperate. Clear. Focused. Final. She wasn't going to wait anymore. Because the moment she had been preparing for wasn't going to feel safe. It was going to feel uncertain. Unstable. Incomplete. But it was the only moment she was going to get. And she knew it. Everything had to happen fast. No second guesses. No time to rethink what she already knew. The moment opened, and she moved. Quiet at first. Controlled. Every step placed where she had imagined it before. The space felt different now. Not safe. Not predictable. Just open enough. One wrong move, and it was over. A sound behind her, closer than expected. Not loud. But wrong. She stopped. Just for a second. Listening. Waiting for confirmation that she'd been noticed. Nothing. Not yet. She kept moving. Faster now. The structure she had studied was breaking around her. Doors that once followed rules now felt uncertain. Timing no longer guaranteed anything. A turn she almost missed. A pause that lasted too long. Another sound. This time, closer. She didn't look back. Because looking back would slow her down. And slowing down wasn't an option anymore. The final barrier stood between her and everything she hadn't seen in days. For a moment, it didn't move. A fraction of hesitation. A second where everything could collapse. Then, it gave way. Then suddenly, she was outside. Air that felt wider. Space that didn't close in around her. But the danger didn't disappear. Because being outside didn't mean she was safe yet. She kept moving. Not stopping. Not thinking beyond the next step. Because the escape wasn't the end. It was just the first moment. She had a chance to survive. Sirens didn't come immediately. Not at first. What came first was distance. Space between her and the place she had just left. Steps that didn't stop until her body finally gave in to the reality of being seen. Then everything shifted. Voices. Lights. Questions she could barely process. Authorities stepped in fast, but carefully. Because nothing about what she was saying sounded simple. At first, her words came in fragments. Not confusion, just precision. She didn't describe fear. She described details. Routes. Timing. Patterns. The things she had been holding on to. What she told them changed everything. Because for the first time, there was structure. Not guesses. Not assumptions. A pattern. Locations were traced. Movements reconstructed. A path that had existed in pieces, now connected. And once it connected, it led somewhere real. The arrest didn't happen loudly. No chase. No chaos. Just a door, opened by people who already knew what they were walking into. And a man who, for the first time, was no longer in control. After that, the truth came slowly. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Evidence confirmed what had only been feared. There had been others. More than anyone had realized. Lives that had disappeared without answers. Now finally connected to something real. She wasn't just a survivor. She was the reason it ended. Because without her, there would have been no pattern. No structure. No way to see what had been hidden in plain sight. The town didn't return to normal. Not completely. Because once something like that is uncovered, normal doesn't exist the same way anymore. And even now, long after everything was closed, documented, and explained, one question still lingers. If he hadn't made that one mistake, would anyone have ever escaped?